Hello, everyone. I'm Kenneth,
I'm Matthew.
and we are the Movie Meisters. We just saw the movie Princess Mononoke. Princess Mononoke follows a young prince in medieval Japan. He's the last prince of his tribe, and they're almost extinct. He gets infected by this demon, so he goes to travel to try to cure himself. In the process of doing that, he finds himself caught in a conflict between the industrialized Iron Town and the gods of the forest. So, this is kind of like an alternate medieval Japan where demons and gods exist. The film is by Hayao Miyazaki, and this was his last movie. He always talks about how he's going to retire, and he eventually did, I guess. But anyway, Matt, what do you think of Princess Mononoke?
Oh, it's so good. So very good.
Yeah, you've told me many times this is your favorite Miyazaki film, maybe even favorite like Studio Ghibli film.
I guess it's sort of a hero's journey movie, but a little bit more grown up. The plot lines are more interesting, the characters are more interesting. There's this famous interview where Miyazaki kind of badmouths Star Wars and says he doesn't understand why anyone would watch movies about space because it's all full of just emptiness and machines and there's nothing interesting there. And, kind of missing the point of Star Wars, I think. But at the same time, I think he kind of has the chops to back up that statement because here is his hero's journey movie, and I think it's better than Star Wars. It's that, but just so much better.
One of the things that struck me about this movie, so this is only the second time I've seen this, and first time I saw it, I was rather young and I didn't really understand it. Seeing it again this time, this movie is like Fern Gully or James Cameron's Avatar, except without the cut and dry, oh, this is good, this is bad. It shows you the industrialized area of Irontown and the lady who runs it, Lady Eboshi. It also shows you the gods of the forest. They're not just one way. Kind of the issue with like a Fern Gully or an Avatar is it's like, all right, so the industrialized people are just complete douchebags. There's not a single redeeming element of them. And the people of the forest are the wise ones and they're the spiritual ones and we should listen to them. The great thing about Princess Mononoke is it's not that cut and dry. So Lady Eboshi, while technically being the film's antagonist, it shows you that she's using the town to help disenfranchise people. So she has lepers working for her, and she has former brothel workers working for her, and she's sort of trying to help them out, give them a means of living outside of where they would not be accepted. And at the same time, you see the gods of the forest who, while having their own noble way, they also can be rather vicious and maybe stubborn at times. So it's not so cut and dry. And then right in the middle, of course, we have the main character, Ashitaka, who's trying to bring balance to both sides because he's kind of the outsider. He's from a completely different area and he's been kind of isolated from the world. And he knows how the world should be viewed, but the other sides kind of don't want to listen to each other. And it's that complexity that makes it like so much better than those other movies. It's great.
It really is difficult to put your finger on what makes the characters tick because first you're going to think Lady Eboshi is this sort of evil person that's caused all these problems. Then you get more sympathetic to her and even her whole point of view because after all isn't industrialization that has brought about, the idea of lepers not being excluded from society, opportunity to have a meaningful living. But she's kind of ruthless, I think you find out yet later in the movie. It's ambiguous toward the end whether when all the men who go with her from Irontown die, so is she being coerced by the Emperor's men to sacrificing her own people, or is she just very callous and sort of using them as pawns for her own ends? And she refuses to go back to liberate Irontown from the attacks of the samurais. Does she really believe that the women of Irontown can stand up for themselves, or is she just kind of selfishly going after her own goals? It's never really spelled out for you, and so you're kind of in the position of Ashitaka where there are a lot of competing forces going on in this movie, and you aren't really sure who it is you're supposed to side with. And I think that did not come across to me when I was young and I watched this. I definitely saw it as a sort of Fern Gully type of deal where Irontown is the bad guy and they want to kill the forest spirit, and that's bad. But it really isn't like that. I think even in this movie, the animals and the forest gods are in the same relation to the forest spirit as the people are, right? The
Right.
animals are just kind of a different kind of people. They have their own reasons for revenge and fighting and killing, and they don't understand the forest spirit any more than people do, right? They don't want to kill it, but they're completely in the dark about it. They are shown arguing about it, fighting over it. The forest spirit shows up at one point during a confrontation between two of the animal gods, and
Right.
rather than doing what you might expect in Ferngully and siding with the good guy, it just kills both of them
Right.
instantly.
Yeah.
So nature is not even presented in this movie as a moral good. It's a kind of unknowable force that dispenses life and death capriciously, right? So when the forest spirit walks, flowers grow up around its feet and then instantly wither away and die.
Right.
And its breath kills the little plants. You know, it's the forest spirit represents nature. Whatever happens is due to the forest spirit. So that has to include every horrible thing that happens, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have human valuations, but it also doesn't even have animal evaluations of what's good and bad. It doesn't really side with anyone.
Your point about the animal gods not understanding the will of the forest spirit, even though claiming to do so. The forest spirit saves our main character after he gets shot when he saves San from Irontown. So after he gets shot, the forest spirit saves him, but the boars are still saying, why don't we just eat him or something, because he's just another one of those humans. But the wolves say, well, no, the forest spirit saved him. We should listen to the forest spirit. But they said, no, we don't believe you. So it's just, it shows that there's no real understanding of the forces of nature or the forest spirit. And the forest spirit, how it reacts, is dependent on how each of these groups treat it or react to it. So Lady Eboshi wants more industrialization. She wants to use more of the natural resources. And inevitably, there's going to be some pushback by the forces of nature because of that. And that's epitomized in the final sequence of the film.
Yeah, so I think the transformation of the forest spirit when its head cuts off was the most impressive thing to me about this movie because it really does emphasize the whole aspect of nature being incomprehensible and uncaring. Like, you have all these plots going on, and it just wipes some of them out. Like, there's this whole plot about the women defending Irontown and the samurai, and it just, as a side effect, not intending to, it stops that plot from existing. It just wipes out the entire army and resolves that plot line. It never comes to an end. All the people die. And then, later on, it just wipes out all of Irontown. So,
yeah.
It's not a force of good that you can upset and bring back into balance. It's an unknowable thing that if you touch it and mess with it and tweak it on the nose can just fuck up your whole world. All the characters in this, they seem like they're so smart. The guy working for the Emperor, Lady Eboshi, they're like plans and counter plans, right? And then they mess with the forest spirit. Everything is just decimated. They're out of their depth.
Yes.
Right? And the whole look of it, how it's so this unnatural blob thing, right? It really reminds me. I'm gonna read a little bit of it. This is from Call of Cthulhu because it really does remind me of H.P. Lovecraft's idea of this alienness. The region now entered by the police was one of traditionally evil repute, substantially unknown and untraversed by white men. There were legends of a hidden lake unglimpsed by mortal sight, in which dwelt a huge, formless, white, polypous thing with luminous eyes, and squatters whispered that bat-winged devils flew up out of the caverns in inner earth to worship it at midnight. They said it had been there before d'Iberville, before La Salle, before the Indians, and before even the wholesome beasts and birds of the woods. It was nightmare itself, and to see it was to die. But it made men dream, and so they knew enough to keep away. So that's the forest spirit from this movie, right? They say no one has gone through the forest and made it out alive. Like, well, how could that be? Mm-hmm. How do people know that? Well,
yeah, that's true.
If you try and get a hold of what nature is like, it seems unnatural. It's so alien to the way that you are and the way that you think, and it can just wreck your world.
And it seems like the only character in the film that really understands this doesn't understand the force of nature, but understands there are consequences to messing with it. Everyone thinks they understand what the forest spirit wants, or wants to destroy it. The only character that really understands this concept is Ashitaka. He's just trying to calm everything down between the groups and say, don't mess with nature, don't try to take sides because you're going to get screwed over. And in the end, Irontown gets destroyed. The Boar King ends up turning into a demon because they were trying to mess with nature. And I guess that's the ultimate takeaway here.
Right, like, so even the quest of saving the forest, right? Like, the apes want to save the forest, and it seems like they're misguided from the point of view of the movie. And even after the forest spirit is killed and all this stuff, the forest just starts over again. And Ashitaka says, well, look, the forest spirit can't die. It's like it's still there,
Mhm.
and the forest is eventually going to come back. So it's almost like even the events of the plot of this movie and the fact that the forest spirit can be messed with and killed is irrelevant to the forest spirit. It will just keep going. It doesn't have to be this deer or whatever. It's like this whole enterprise. All it did was cause suffering for the people involved, right?
Yeah,
It didn't hurt the forest spirit, right?
it's true.
Who
Yeah.
will keep going on through the ages. They're only destroying themselves.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Hayao Miyazaki. There are lots of things that appear in his films. He tends to have a lot of supernatural creatures and love stories and elderly people who just accept the supernatural creatures as just, yeah, this is the regular thing. How would you compare this movie to his other films? There are similarities to this and, some of his earlier stuff, except it's darker. It's more violent. There's more lofty themes of, I guess, just more death in this movie. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting turn. I mean, you watch Kiki's Delivery Service or My Neighbor Totoro, and then you go to this movie. It seems like night and day almost.
Well, I think there are things that stay the same. So in a lot of the movies, you have characters who are sort of very graceful and competent in a certain way. Like in this movie, whenever something has to be done and a main character is doing it, they're just on it instantly, and they can kind of turn on a dime and change the direction of what they're doing, even if it's some change in the plot. There's kind of the motion of their body seems to go with. You're watching what's happening, and you want them to do something
Mhm.
because of what's changing the plot, and then they just at the precise moment, they just are instantly doing it. They just seem infinitely competent, right?
Yeah.
And when they talk, they have this kind of very clear moral stance that seems almost innocent in how straightforward and simple it is. It reminds me of like Antigone or something. Or if you want to
Uh,
use something closer to animation, I guess Stan Lee's Silver Surfer talks like this. Very
oh, sure, yeah.
straightforward, Spock-like, but just instantly right. Like someone will ask some ambiguous moral thing, he'll just instantly come back with a straightforward, clear moral message. That's just, look, this is what we have to do. What are you doing, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, that kind of thing I see as a sort of guiding theme through all this. So even though it's violent, it doesn't lose that kind of charming feeling where you kind of root for the main characters because their personalities are sort of very natural and relatable.
Ashitaka is, when we're looking at it in a traditional sense, comparing him to like other main protagonists in movies, he's not the cocky character who, oh, we have so much fun watching because, oh, he's just a fun character. He's also not a character who's flawed and we're seeing him come to some kind of moral resolution here. He's, in fact, in this movie, he's the character trying to get other characters to reach their moral resolution. And I think probably the scene that best epitomizes this is Lady Iboshi and San, who's the daughter of the wolf tribe. The two of them are fighting, and the demon infection on Ashitaka's arm gives him the strength to bend the bodyguard's sword and then come in and he blocks both of them. He has the strength to just say, look, this is hatred. Look what it's done to me. And I really like that scene. It's just, you've got the two main conflicts going on. You've got the character representing the forest gods, and you have the character representing Irontown, and he walks right into the middle of that conflict. Yeah, it's a unique take. You're talking about Star Wars. It's not the traditional hero's narrative. I mean, at first it seems like it's going to be that way. He gets exiled from his village just because I guess because it's their custom, he's leaving, and he really can't come back, and no one's supposed to look at him, and then we're supposed to be, oh, well, he's on his adventure now, but it's so much more than that.
Right, and it doesn't resolve either in the way that you would expect a hero's journey story to resolve. So there's no actual saving the day that occurs in this movie. The best they can do is move the people out of Irontown before it is flattened. So they
Right.
save some of the people, but the conflict happened. He doesn't prevent the hatred from escalating to the point where it kills the forest spirit and destroys everything, right? So it's a failure on that ground.
Sure, yeah.
Right, and even in the end, it's just like, well, eventually the forest will grow back. And the romance isn't resolved either. It's like, well, we've gone through all these experiences together, but at the end of the day, we're very different. So different that we actually can't have a life together like we might have wanted, right?
Right.
So there's no really resolution to anything. It's just kind of like, look, deal with it, kid.
Yeah.
Sometimes life is just that way.
Yeah, it's surprisingly realistic for an animated adventure movie. At least that's the image that you would get from it. The main character doesn't get the girl. They don't really prevent the awful thing from happening, so the Death Star does destroy Yavin 4.
San does not get to kill Lady Eboshi.
No, she does not.
Nobody gets to kill Lady Eboshi.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. We don't know at the end if the wolves still have a desire to, kill Lady Oboshi. She's still alive. The monk government guy who is sort of manipulating Lady Oboshi into destroying the forest spirit, he's still alive.
Yeah, he's at large.
He's at
There's
large.
nothing.
Yeah.
Moving on to his next adventure for the Emperor, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and
he doesn't learn any. He certainly doesn't learn anything.
yeah, he certainly doesn't learn.
He nearly is killed by the wave of black goo, and then he's just like, well, everyone here is an idiot but me. I guess.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it was coming down to the wire. It seemed like if Ashitaka hadn't intervened, he might have been able to get away with the head. It's kind of unclear that he was doomed to die in that scenario. He only gets trapped because the main character kind of stops him.
That's true. Yeah. He could have just gotten away with the head, and then I guess the idea is the forest spirit would die.
Right, which all they know about the forest spirit is the legends, right?
Right.
So whether he even just made that up in the moment, that the forest spirit is somehow going to go away if he can only get the head to the Emperor.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, no one has gone up into the forest and seen the forest spirit and lived. Well, we see the main character dragging two dying people back to Irontown through the forest area where the forest spirit resides, and it didn't seem like they had much trouble getting through there. So, yeah, it's that illusion that just remains even after it all happens. Yeah, it's great. It's not intended for a younger audience, so I guess we both saw it when we were young first, and it's like, well, this is kind of a typical...
I know, but you enjoy it when you're young.
Oh, of course,
you have this very satisfying cartoon violence. Like, he has this demon curse on his arm, which makes him extremely strong, and so he can do ridiculous things without even intending to, like knocking people's heads off with arrows and stuff. Even though, I guess, the message of this is that character's about anti-violence. The animation is done so well that it's like, oh, yeah. Bam, you got him.
That's true.
And then there's cute things, I think, that children will appreciate, like he's carrying the guy through the forest, and he's following the little kodamas. And then the little kodamas are like, as they're leading them, are just like playfully mocking him by like carrying each other on their backs. They have no problem doing it because they're spirits or whatever. And he kind of chuckles to himself, like there's sort of the childish spirits who don't understand suffering and all this. It's so many nice little things like that. It's filled with things.
Yeah, it's filled with things. And that you could say that about pretty much any Miyazaki movie, but this one, yeah, you can enjoy it on a superficial level as a young child. It has the action scenes, it has the adventure element, but as an adult, you really appreciate the morally gray element. It's a very adult story.
I guess I would just want to emphasize that this movie is very visually impressive. They have the painted backgrounds, it's this lovely detail. The animation is simpler and smoother than the backgrounds, and yet it flows and fits in with them very well. You have a character lying on top of an embankment, and it looks like they're lying on something, even though the background is this sort of detailed painting, and the character is much simpler. It's painstakingly crafted to be wonderful. Everything is timed to be whatever it needs to be for that scene. It's just everyone involved with animation has gone over this minutely and done it exactly the way it needed to be, which is good.
Yeah, it's
I guess it's what you would expect.
Yeah.
From Studio Ghibli, but I think we shouldn't just pass over it in silence because it's
yeah, definitely not. Hayao Miyazaki apparently went to some isolated island in Japan just to get photographs or just to see environments that he wanted to represent his movie. And yeah, it's a lot of effort, looking for scouting locations for an animated film. It's great.
This one bad thing about this movie is that it has the curse of every Japanese animated thing ever, which is the main characters yell out each other's names all the fucking time.
Oh,
I don't understand what it is about Japan and thinking that it adds to a dramatic scene to have the characters just yell out at each other, but it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. Well, those are our thoughts on Princess Mononoke, or Mononoke Hime for Japan for the Japanese title. My name is Kenneth,
I'm Matt.
and we are the Movie Meisters saying
Cinema is not a slice of life, but a piece of cake.
thanks for watching.